Hey everybody, wanted to make a quick video here to take a deeper dive in answering this question from the community forums, as well as it was kind of brought up and discussed in the partner Slack channel. So I just wanted to share kind of my approach. Basically, the question is, if you have two arrays, how do you get the values which are in array 1 and not in array 2? So comparing two arrays, what are the how do we go about getting the unique values that are just in A? And Alex goes through a great example here, demonstrating again the desired output is to get A and D because those are what are unique in just the first array. And he's got a great example here of going through an iterator and an array aggregator and filtering some of those, which is great. I was talking with Alex in the Slack about a different way to do that. And so what I've built out is a fairly simple custom app, and it uses right now is just a single module in there. It's really pretty basic, but in the back end of it, for if you don't know, making custom apps, you can create custom IMLfs, Integromat language functions, where you can use vanilla ES6 JavaScript to kind of do some magic. So, and I am not a JavaScript wizard, but this is fairly easy to figure out. Piggybacking off Alex's feedback was why don't we have some of these as just functions inside of Integromat or make itself? We have, to array, to a collection, map, join. We have some, but not all. So there's a pretty helpful yet simple article on Medium, and I'll link to this too, that talks about array intersection, difference, and unions. I'm not going to focus so much on the union portion, but I've built this app out to do three things. One is to handle an intersection of when you have two arrays, bring back the values or elements that they share in common, and then the difference from A when compared against B. So only pull back the unique items or elements that are in A that are not in B. And then the symmetrical difference, which is comparing two arrays and returning all of the unique values, but not what they share in common. So this is kind of the opposite of intersection there. And then there's other things about union and joining those, but those are fairly easy as it stands with the tools that we have. So here's my example on what it looks like, and I'll start with taking a quick peek at the difference here. So this module allows you to select any of those three we talked about: intersection, difference, or the symmetrical difference. Some notes, and here's a link to that article. And here's just where we plug in that array. And here you can see from just my sample data that the array is just a simple array, a flat array of numbers. So here it is here. I'm just using split to build that array out for me. But you can see that there are unique values in both the, here, this will be a little better view. Yeah, so there are unique values in each array, and there are shared values in each array. So this is a good example to walk through those. So with intersection, let me turn that off real quick. Yeah, so with intersection, it's going to return the values that are, move my face out of the way. It's going to return values that are shared between the two. So here we have the values 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are shared between the two arrays. But here I'm doing a difference comparison where it's going to only return the unique elements in this array. So for some reason you're like, well, I want the unique stuff from B. Well, just swap these mappable things around and they'll have your correct output. And I do that right here as an example. But here we go. So the unique values in A when compared against B are 11 and 14. And with B compared against A, we have 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then that last option was the symmetrical difference. And if we look at that, these are the unique values in either array when compared against each other. So 11, 14, 2, 4, and 6. So there we have it. So that works pretty well when we have a simple array like this. And I'll note that all of these by default, this module outputs bundles. So for me, a comparison like this is helpful for two-way data syncs, where you might say, well, I just want to know what's new in my first data set. And so I have these two, but really I'm probably going to want to make that actionable. So, all right, well, I need to update and add values 11 and 14 into my secondary data source. And so this makes a convenient way to compare large numbers. But then, on here, it may be an API call to something else to say, add those values or update something in your other endpoint there. But again, you could also, maybe you want to use these and you just want to have not bundles of data, but you just want to have that array as text or a string or something. Maybe you want to text that out to somebody, email that out, do something unique with it. So if we come in here to the advanced settings, we can modify the output instead of being individual bundles for each value in the array. It's just going to give us a single array. So if I save that and fire, get out of your face, fire away. Then when we come back in here, we can see that it changes. So we have one bundle, but the results are there in that array. If we look at the output there, we can see what the results look like. So again, you could convert that to a string or something if you wanted to as well, and makes it a little tighter of a package. And basically all that does is allows you that configurability of if you want multiple bundles or one bundle coming out. And again, that saves you a little step by not having to have an array aggregator or something in there. So just a tiny little feature there. So if you were working with a more complex data set, and so here I have some values from like an IT management, asset management app. I won't scroll through there, but it's an object. It's an array with two objects with lots of different fields. And I want to compare this ID that's unique to each of the records that's pulled back there. So because this is just sample text, I have to go through and parse the JSON, which then gives me my output. And then I can aggregate those. So I'm only aggregating just that ID field there, so that my end result is just an array with two IDs. And I do the same thing for this for my second data set. So when I come here, I have an array with two IDs. And in these, if you just notice that this is a 1 and a 3, and then this data set ends in a 1 and a 2 here. So now if I come through here and I apply difference against those, again, it's going to give me what's unique in the first array compared to the second. And I'm using map here to simplify it down and only return an array of those IDs rather than anything key value. And if I were to run that, again, it'll show what my input looks like here. And my output comparison is just one bundle because only one is unique. Again, here we can see that it ends in a 2, and there's my 2 there. And again, if I wanted the opposite of that, I said, well, I'm not noticing here that 3 is unique in the second bundle. Well, I could just come through and flip the difference there, or flip these two around, array 17 and 18. Or if I want to know the total unique differences between them, then I could run this again. And we would see the one that ends in both 2 and 3. And again, if we ran the intersection, we'll see that it's the one that ends in number 1 that is the same across both. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an example of how that can work. Yeah, and if that's all that you need, then that's good. But if you want to hold on a little tighter and see how I went about building this module so that you can build your own, yeah, I'll just kind of walk you through that. What is tricky about this, and I think probably one of the reasons why it's not in make as a function is that we're using really simple data sets as they're coming in. This one's a bit more complex, and it has some nested objects and arrays and things within it. But again, we're cleaning that up and reformatting that with this array aggregator, simplifying it down to just the IDs, and then mapping that even simpler there. If you knew exactly what your data set coming in and going that you're comparing against, you can build that out in the backend JavaScript, and you can kind of avoid some of this. But again, currently it's fairly flexible, just depends how many operations you're trying to save. If the flexibility is worth the cost of operations, then this is good, versus if you're at scale with frequent and you're running this frequently, then you want to optimize for operations and then customize that JavaScript to fit your unique scenario that you have going on. So here's what the JavaScript looks like. Make that smaller to fit in. Yeah, and it looks a little complicated, but it's really not. And again, these are totally pulled just from this Medium article here that's there as values that are in there. And I'm just using a parameter, mappable parameter in the module settings to set these particular values. And then this just simple JavaScript is just saying, well, if you select that intersection, then run this code. I have these debugs sprinkled around so that when you run them inside of make and you open up the developer console, you'll be able to see the values that it's running here and what types, and that's helpful when you are building out your IMLf here, because again, you're a little bit limited in your debugging tools if you're building right here natively. There is an article that I think is just on Make and not Integromat about IMLfs and some different ways to debug those with, I think, Mocha and inside of VS Code and things like that. And VS Code is super handy for building custom apps, but depending on what I'm doing, I'm usually just working from the web portal here. So yeah, but debug is a way to help you build that inside of the Chrome Dev Console and see some of that output. It would be similar to console log more traditionally in JavaScript, but that just forces it into Chrome, I think. And you might even be able to use console log. Again, I'm not a JavaScript wizard, but again, it's going to match one of these, and that's why I don't have a default option here within the switch bits, because it's going to be forced to be one of these three. So again, debug it and then just return that as my value there. Diff it up nice. And then here's what the module setup looks like. I'm using multiple requests, but these are request list communication requests or something. Sorry, it's late. I'm tired. But basically, I'm not saying, what's my URL, what's my method, because I don't need to make any sort of external request, because I have all my data just here already, and it makes it pretty quick in terms of processing and execution. And the only reason that I'm using multiple requests is because I kind of wanted to have this little convenient option in the advanced settings of what's the output type. And again, as a custom module, you can see I'm using search. And when you use search, it expects an object to be your output. Once bundled data that it's going to kind of iterate through. If I were to come in here and change this to an action, that's where I could just return the array itself, just return the results itself without having to kind of do this. So again, this is probably not recommended by Make or anybody. The alternative to this would have been to just create two separate modules, one that does bundles and one that does a single array. That's probably the better choice, but this was fun and I just kind of wanted to do it this way. So, and it's a little bit of a good example of conditions and working with that. So, but here you can see diff it up nice, and my inputs there are just that parameter array A, parameter array B, and what type of thing are you wanting to do. And again, that type of thing here is just that intersection difference or symmetrical difference that's there. But I'm using conditions to check if that parameter of do you want a single array or bundles is set at all. So if it's empty, then we're just going to default to returning bundles of data, which is totally fine. Most people probably want that, maybe. But if it's not empty, then we're going to go ahead and come in through here and check again as a secondary if of saying is it set to bundles? If so, then true. And again, the conditions will choose which one of these processes or fires. Sometimes we use these in custom modules to like do step one and have some temp data that we put into the secondary request. But again, in this one, there's two, but it's only going to fire one of those, depending on either if it's empty or if we chose bundles or single array. And again, it's going to return this pretty similarly. You could have a third a request that's at the top that just takes this to some temp data so that this is a little bit cleaner as you're doing this, and instead of just this long string with a whole bunch of extra parentheses, we just have, you know, temp.output or something. But I went ahead and kept it this way just because I didn't want a third that was in there. And then I think that's pretty much it. One note, if you're particular about your custom apps, is I don't have anything in the interface here, meaning that if you're inside of the scenario and you're building it out and you have not run this module later on, you won't have any mappable values that are available. And again, I did that because the data structure is different based on what you choose for this advanced option of singular bundles. But again, this isn't a high priority app. And again, that's another reason why you probably shouldn't bend the rules and force it to output two different things. But essentially, again, this is just forcing it to, I'm just kind of manually building kind of the JSON there for the output. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, this is a pretty basic example. Obviously, you could get far more advanced with the JavaScript that you do. I think that you're limited to 5,000 characters and anything that's vanilla or ES6. Unfortunately, you can't load external libraries. I've tried, I've asked, and so there's no Lodash, and there's no underscore, anything like that that kind of makes some of this a little bit easier. But again, with the filter method, we've got some options at least. So hopefully that makes sense. If you stuck with me this whole time, congratulations. Just shoot me a message and I'll be happy to share this little custom app with you, and you can poke around and play with it. If you'd like any of the source too, just let me know and I'll send that your way. But I'll post this here as well as an option there and in the partner Slack for people to take a look at. Wasn't that fun? Have a good night or day or whatever time it is. Enjoy.